How's it going today, guys? It is Anime Casuals here. Lucky as your host. Johnny and Michael are not here for this one, so you know it's probably going to be something to think about. This is going to be a philosophy video, maybe a bit of on the theological side, but we'll get to that later. Today we're going to talk about sins, and the thing that made me think about this is these two series that both portray the seven deadly sins in kind of two different lights. In the anime series, oh, by the way, this is gonna be extremely spoiler heavy for both series. So if you have not caught up, you haven't finished season 1 and season 2 of Seven Deadly Sins, and if you have not finished all of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, and I guess if you haven't finished the other Fullmetal Alchemist anyway. I'll be mostly focusing on Brotherhood anyway, but yeah, if you haven't finished any of those series, I strongly recommend you do so. They are very, very good. And yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So when we talk about a sin, let me just clarify what a sin is, and this is literally I just pulled this up on the internet. This is just a internet or dictionary definition: an immoral act considered to be a transgression against divine law. Okay. So we always hear about sins, So let's go through the seven deadly sins first off. So we have envy, sloth, greed, lust, pride, wrath, and gluttony, right? Now, here's the thing about sins, right? Because we think... I feel, I grew up in a religious background. I still am religious. And I feel like people outside of religion look at sin as if it's, oh, I'm just a sinner and that's all I am. And they kind of give up on religion because they think it's very black and white, but it's not quite as black and white, especially nowadays. And I don't think it's ever exactly been completely black and white, but that's just my opinion. But when we talk about a sin, right? There is the Lord's Prayer, which even inside of it states, "Please forgive us our sins and our sinners." Right, so that's part of the Lord's Prayer, paraphrasing just a little bit. But so sins, that's really important because sins can be forgiven, right? So there's that kind of thing. And the reason why I wanted to talk about sins today is because I think it brings kind of an interesting light into how we see things. And I'm going to get into a little bit of, I never really studied, I didn't study a lot of Eastern philosophy, but I really like the idea of yin yang, because we can't really have light without the dark and dark without the light. Okay, so that you really have to kind of balance things out, and that also comes with sins. If you think about sins for the most part, right? Sins in their base form are just ways that we survive. Gluttony, we need to eat in order to survive. When we overeat, it becomes gluttony, right? Lust, if we didn't have lust, you would not be here. You and I would not be here. Our parents had a form of it, which is love. Once it goes a little bit past that, it turns into lust. So anything in excess is basically what the sins are. But I thought it was interesting after watching the second season of Seven Deadly Sins, because I was thinking about how like, wait a minute, how do we have Seven Deadly Sins as protagonists in one series and Seven Deadly Sins as antagonists in another series, meaning the embodiment of those sins. So if we look at Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, we have Father, who is the original homunculi, creates seven homunculi of his own based off of his own vices. And I think that's the interesting part. I think that would be the reason why that they become evil, because they are embodiments of a person's sins. Whereas if you see people naturally, you'll actually find that there are some people that naturally go towards one sin or another. Okay, if you look at somebody that is, that can't control their eating habits, that's gluttony. Okay, and there also might be some sloth in that. But I've also met people that are, not completely fat or anything, but they're really lazy. They're sloth. And it was interesting. Me and Johnny once talked about this once, and we were asking each other, what two sins do you think you embody the most? And I think I got sloth and gluttony, so which is a fair point. But when you think about it, people naturally kind of gravitate towards some of those things, and it's important to kind of. I like the fact that they're laid out like that. But when we think about Father creates these things, these sins, and the interesting thing about it is one of the sins actually turns on Father, and that's greed. And greed eventually helps. I believe his name's Ling, um, to eventually save everything. He plays a really big part in overthrowing Father, and I think that's the interesting part about sins, right? You can have a sin. You can have a sin that sometimes you need to indulge in some things. At least that's what I believe. Sometimes you need to embody one of these things in order to counter something else. Okay, it's sometimes you'd call it a necessary evil. I don't know if I exactly like that term, but we'll just go with it for right now. But when we look at the seven deadly sins, the anime series, the seven deadly sins, we have them as the protagonist. Now, in the most recent series, one of the seven deadly sins, Gother, is kind of acting very strange, and maybe I'll figure out why he's doing all this crazy crap eventually. But he also turns from good to kind of in the middle ish because he's messing with everybody's memories and stuff. But when you think about Seven Deadly Sins, how could they be protagonists in one series and antagonists in another series? Well, in this series, they are all now they're not all human, but for whatever race they are, let's just say they're comparable to humans in some way, emotionally and spiritually. The interesting thing about that is they naturally embody those sins that they have. Meliodas is kind of more of a mystery to me, and so is Gother. But as for the other ones, just like Escanor, he's kind of cursed with that kind of crazy raw power and pride. And I think it's really interesting because we think of things as so black and white, and I think I was talking to, I mentioned this in another Anime Casuals about how Sasuke and Naruto, there's light and dark in each of them, respectively, and I think we need to kind of look at that. There's nothing completely good in the world, and there's nothing completely bad or evil, and that might be kind of hard to say because you start to go down the list. Like when I say there's nothing completely evil, all of a sudden you go down the list of like, oh, wait about this, what about this, what about this? And I remember I was drinking in a bar one time, and I asked somebody, do you think there's anything? Do you think there's anything as true evil? And he said to me something kind of interesting. He said, I don't think there is. There's evil acts, but I think that people themselves are not evil because I think whenever they do an evil act, they do it with good intentions, but it's also like the saying goes, the path to hell is paved with good intentions. So that's kind of an interesting point. This is just more of a video to kind of make you guys think a little bit and me to get my thoughts out there a little bit. But what do you guys think about sins? Do you think that sins are irredeemable, or do you think that, and do you think, where do you draw the line in that, I suppose? And what do you think the importance of sin in our lives sins in our lives are? Do you think they help us to see where we don't want to go, so maybe we stay a little bit more moderate, or I don't know. What do you guys think? Leave a comment in the section below, and keep it casual, guys.